what's up, y'all? It's Michael Franti here, and welcome to this week's episode of the Stay Human podcast presented by Gibson Guitars. And I am super, super excited because, this is a brother who I've known since about 1992 or 3. So if you could believe this, it's 30 years we've known each other, man. I mean, this is really crazy. And Speech is his name. He's the frontman of the 2-time Grammy Award-winning hip-hop collective Arrested Development, and he's received high acclaim from MTV, Rolling Stone, VH1, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and so many others. He's one of the true trailblazers of the genre. And since 1991, Arrested Development have been cultural champions of consciousness and empowerment across the planet. And their representation of eclectic and vibrant African sounds and presence has produced a unique clash of rhythms and styles that just continues to contrast the expected look and the sound of hip hop culture. So please welcome to the show today. He's also going to be coming on the Soulshine at Sea cruise with us.
Yeah.
This is Speech from Arrested Development. How you doing, Speech?
Man, I'm doing great, brother. I'm doing real good. How are you? It's great to see you.
Man, it's awesome to see you. And I got to say, you never age, man.
That's the same with you, Michael. You look fantastic, bro. You're shining. I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of your marriage. I'm proud of your music, your journey. Like for me, bro, it's like, I think about our tour that we did together when you was with Disposables, right? Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy. Yeah. And like we toured together like back in those days. And that was like as such a virgin time for Arrested Development too. And then, and me and Headliner of Arrested Development, we used to rock, the Disposable Heroes records. And even before that, I think it wasn't Disposable Heroes. It was your other band prior to that. Beatniks. And we used, I scratched some of the Beatnik stuff in that first album. Did I tell you that? Did I ever let you know that?
No, I never knew that.
Yeah, awesome. Like on Fishing for Religion, there was a section that said forming stronger churches. And it was like all of this stuff because you had so many like cool like commentary pieces on that Beatniks record, like just vocal little skits and sound effects and all types of great stuff for a DJ. And I came from a DJ background, so I'm speeding. I'll let you ask the questions, but man, I'm real happy to talk to you.
These are the kinds of things I want to know about,
man.
I remember the first time I heard Tennessee, and I'll tell you when it was. I was I had a friend of mine, and his father had a furniture store, and he had kind of this little next door shop where he would make. His father had like a used furniture store, and he would make like new furniture, and so I was in a shop and he said, "Man, have you ever heard this?" And he put on Tennessee, and then a couple weeks later, you guys were coming to San Francisco to play at Club DNA, and it was the night of the Rodney King. Basically the day that the verdict was read, and really, so many places in America went into lockdown. The police were shutting. There was curfew imposed in San Francisco, and I remember being at the gig going, man, if the gig goes too late, we're gonna be out past curfew. And then you guys came on stage, and just that bass of Tennessee coming into the room and filling the place with so much joy and optimism. Even at this time when there was so much pain. For those people who don't remember, all the officers who had beaten Rodney King, I mean, there's no question, we saw them doing it on camera. They were exonerated and let go, and it was so painful for so many, millions of people. But your music really got me through that moment, and I just remember there being in tears and hearing you guys sing that song. And talk to me before I want to get deep on you and where you come from, but talk to me about that track Tennessee and where it came from, because that was the first music that I heard of you guys.
Well, first of all, thank you for that story, bro, because I didn't know what you had experienced and how you came to know our show and that song. For me, the song Tennessee was the last song that we recorded for our first album. And we had pretty much done the album. I had showed, my grandmother passed away, and she's from Tennessee. And I used to spend all my summers, me and my brother, Terry, used to spend all of our summers in Tennessee. So it was a very fundamental part of our life. Very rural town in Tennessee called Glimp. Probably less than 1,000 people in this town, still to this day. And so my grandmother passed, and my whole family got the news. Of course, we traveled to Tennessee to celebrate her life. And so I was in Tennessee with my brother, and I was playing him Mr. Wendell, which is obviously one of the songs on that first album. And he was like, Todd, which is my real name. He's like, Todd, I'm so proud of you, so on and so forth. It was just a really special moment of family. And we all left there with this new sense of hope, this sense of, sort of ancestral power, like from my grandmother now being one of our ancestors. And that same week, my brother died as well. He died of an asthma attack. And so if you could imagine, I felt like the world was just crumbling because, all of us experience death at some point or another, but to experience two of the most important people in your life to die separately from two totally different reasons the same exact week, it just feels like the sky is falling. And so even though the album was pretty much done, I went in the studio, which was a home studio for me, and started writing on Tennessee. And the last place I saw my brother and my grandmother was in Tennessee. So that was sort of the point of writing the song. And it was a prayer at the end of the day, because I just felt so ungrounded. Everything was sort of falling beneath me. And so take me to another place, take me to another land, make me forget all that hurts me, and help me understand your plan was my prayer to God. And, I sent it to the label, and they liked the song a lot. And I told them that I wanted it to be our first single, or else I didn't want to do the album deal. And the reason I was so adamant about it was because that song meant the world to me. And every other song I had written prior, fell in comparison to that song for me. And I just felt like that needed to be the first thing Arrested Development was known for. And they allowed us to shoot a music video for it. And that really sealed the deal for them as a label, because they were like, the song is great, but this video is amazing. And we do agree this should come out as the first single. And that's how it all happened.
It's a beautiful video too. So powerful. And
thank you, man.
I got another question about it that's not super deep and spiritual, but what was the main sample on that record?
It's funny. I used Tennessee from Prince.
Yeah.
He has a song Alphabet Street, and it's like, I'm gonna put her on my backseat and drive her to Tennessee. Yeah. And so I use that literal, just that word, because that's what I was interested in. That was the whole point of the song I was writing. And I just looped that word throughout the whole song, just sort of subconsciously in the background and, more loud in the beginning. And then musically, I sampled some soul music. I sampled funky drummer type drum beats, chopped those up. And then, really just played horns, on my keyboards for the chorus and the solo that Dion Ferris would end up doing. And, sort of went from there. And musically, that was sort of the meat and potatoes of Tennessee. Oh, no. And I actually used a shaker from, the band from the UK, and I'm forgetting. Oh, Brand New Heavies. So I used a shaker from and that was from one of their jams when they just released their incredible debut album. And so I used that as sort of like just sort of the glue rhythmically to bring it all together. And that was it. Yeah.
Great song.
Thank you, man.
Where do you come from? Your roots are in Tennessee, but where were you born? Where were you raised? How many kids were in your family? What was your like?
I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Midwest, and my mother and father had 2 kids, so it was me and my brother. But I lived in a house where my mom was big on foster children, and she was also big on adoption. So she had fostered a lot of different girls, especially at-risk young girls. So growing up, I had some sisters that lived with us for, short periods of time. And then I had a brother from Ghana who wasn't a blood brother. He was a foreign exchange student that my mom had adopted because his mother and father were killed in Ghana. And so after he did his stint as a foreign exchange student with our family, he went back to Ghana for a year and came back and lived with us forever. And so his name is Bright Bortine, and he was my adopted brother. And so two, blood children from my mom and dad, and then an array of different people that sort of lived in the house at different times. So that was my Milwaukee sort of roots.
And what did your mom and dad do for a living?
It's funny because my mom started off as a teacher and my dad was a newspaper publisher. He started the first Black newspaper in Milwaukee. It was called the Milwaukee Times, and the Milwaukee Star Times. I'm sorry. And so then the system of Milwaukee. This is in the 60s. So the system of Milwaukee really went against my dad starting this paper, and they ultimately succeeded in squashing the paper's business. And my mother then started her paper. She was a teacher, as I was saying, and she started a paper, and hers succeeded. And so to this day, she's the publisher of the largest Black newspaper in Wisconsin, which is called the Milwaukee Community Journal. And that's been going on for 45 years. So I'm 52. Wow. So since I was 7, my mom really had the marathon run with Black newspapers, and my dad ended up working for her as just one of her partners in that endeavor. So, my mom and dad were both in the sort of Black business realm and newspaper business in particular.
Yeah. And they were, in San Francisco, in our neighborhood, we have the Bayview paper, and it's there are very few Black newspapers that are still going, and they always have a, the voice of the people and the consciousness of the streets, as well as what's happening nationally, what's happening in entertainment, like everything that you don't see really in mainstream newspapers. And how did your mom, and I presume that your mom's paper was full of that kind of culture and consciousness too. How did your mom come to be that? How did your dad come to be those kinds of people?
Great question, Michael. So in Milwaukee, there was a riot during Dr. Martin Luther King's assassination. The response to that had a huge riot in Milwaukee, and thriving Black businesses were looted, destroyed, along with some white-owned businesses and other nationalities who owned businesses, looted and destroyed from people's utter frustration of losing probably the most peaceful leader and moral leader that this nation has ever seen. And so the businesses that were once thriving, but now totally gutted out, when they were able to rebuild a little bit and get their grounding back, they needed to let the community know that they were open for business. And even if the rest of the community was burnt and a lot of stuff was wrong, they wanted to let the community know. And there was no outlet for that to happen. There was a major newspaper in Milwaukee called the Milwaukee Sentinel. And that newspaper declined to cover the intricacies of these businesses being open. And so they asked my mother, who at the time was a teacher, and my dad had previous to her had a small paper that had lasted only a short time. So they said, hey, would you do a flyer called the Soul City Shopper and let people know that there is some Black businesses that are back open. Please come and support us so we can stay open. And she did that. And that turned into a weekly thing. And then it turned into putting some advertisements in that Soul City Shopper. And then it turned into the Milwaukee Community Journal. So that's how she got into the newspaper business. And my father was a support for her.
Mm-hmm. And so as the child of two publishers, What was it like for you as a kid growing up? Was academia really important in your household?
Yeah. Yeah. Discussions, especially. My mother was an academia person because she obviously was a teacher prior to doing the newspaper. And my dad was more from the streets as a dude, but had decided to pour his energy into entrepreneurship. So
Uh-huh.
his way of approaching things was more street. My mom's way of approaching things was more academic. And so our conversations as a family, when we would sit down for breakfast, was to talk about a lot of the issues that were affecting Black people in Milwaukee. And what do you guys think would solve it? And that was, I think, and as an adult, I see it clearly that that was my dad's way in particular of teaching us how to think analytically and teaching us how to work through what are some of the issues that are going on in this world and how can you be a catalyst to change those things, kids, you know? So as we're sitting at breakfast, we talk about stupid stuff, but we'd also talk about those things. And I think that that was very much an intentional cultural thing that my mother and father were trying to set up for their kids to be able to deal with. You know, I was born in 1968. And so that was the year that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. So, you know, if you can imagine the turmoil that's just existing in the nation, and I'm a Black kid in a all white neighborhood. So my mother and father came from very poor conditions. My mom from East St. Louis, my dad from Tennessee. So when they moved to Milwaukee and got a little bit of money, they moved us into this all white neighborhood. It was a suburban neighborhood. And we were the only Black family there. So I think they were striving to teach us how to navigate race without tainting us and without making us see the darkness that the world could possess at times, and still try to help us to navigate it all. So I think all of that was very intentional for them.
Right. So what was school like for you? Was it something that you enjoyed? Were you thriving in school, or was school challenging for you, both socially as well as, you know, classroom and academically?
That's a great question, because initially, like from my kindergarten to third grade, I was really excelling in school. I was the only Black kid in the school, so that was always very challenging. And as a young kid, you don't really, well, at least I didn't really think about it. I knew that I was darker than everybody else, but to me, I sort of just wanted to fit in with everybody, as most kids want to. But unfortunately, I got a lot of racism, a lot of kids calling me nigger, a lot of but it's funny because as a young kid, I didn't even really look at it as bad. So some of my friends, like these are my close friends, would call me nigger, and I don't know, I didn't understand it all. Mm-hmm. And so I did really well into third grade. In third grade, there's data that shows there's a professor named Dr. Kwanzaa Kajufu, and he did a study about third grade is usually a time where Black kids start to not do as well academically in the way that the system school-wise is set up. And it's because it goes from more of a communal way of learning from first to third grade, and then third grade on up, it goes into more of a competition-oriented thing where our test scores, you know, you got a 78, I got a 92, and it goes into that type of thinking. And generally speaking, people from African cultures and descent don't tend to think in that way as easily. So that happened for me. At third grade, I started to not do as well at school, and I started sucking at school, and I started sinking myself into music. You know what I mean? Like, in my mind, I'm at school, but I'm at the desk, just beating on the desk. I'm listening to Cameo and, you know, Confunction and Bar-Kays and, you know, Ray Parker Jr. radio and like all of this soul music that was coming out at the time. And I'm in that zone. So academically and like school wise, I really, to be honest, Michael, I sucked until I was in college. Like, and just to add to that, the reason I started changing my viewpoint was from Black consciousness. Like for me, I started to read books about, you know, Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey and listening to Public Enemy and stuff like this. And I was like, you know, I think there's a whole nother world here that I needed to explore. And there's a whole nother understanding of who I am that I needed to try to uncover and unwrap. And when I started doing that, I realized that there was another trajectory for me as a Black person. And that was this trajectory of excellence and, thinking of the ancient kingdoms and empires in Mali and Egypt and all of these things that I had learned about. I was like, well, wait a minute. Oh, so there is such thing as Black excellence that, is way prior to the Atlantic slave trade and all of the things that happened during those years. And I didn't really know about that. It wasn't taught to me. So
what age were you starting to get into that?
To be honest, about 18, 19. And
so already when you'd left high school and
left high school, and I went to college in Atlanta, and I decided like that Black consciousness flipped a switch for me. I was like, oh, okay, I need to be an excellent Black man. I need to be a man that stands for morality, that stands for, academic intelligence, that stands for progression and pushing things forward in a positive way. Like that is who I need to be. Mm-hmm. And it totally was a flip switch for me, and it was a good thing. And
I want to jump ahead to just a little bit to touch on that, because, when Arrested Development, the first album, really just exploded. I mean, it became an international, sensation. Like very few records have. I mean, I look at like, Michael Jackson's, Beat It album. You look at like, the Supernatural album by Carlos Santana. Your record was like that kind of huge, like everywhere. And you were bringing this consciousness out that a lot until that time, there was more underground artists. We had X-Clan, we had KRS-One, we had artists like that who were big. These are massive records for the Black community and for all the white kids who love hip hop. But I mean, when you guys came out, it took over the planet, and and at the same time, there was like backlash that I felt and heard within, the hip hop community of, oh, those are the guys trying to be too smart, trying to be too conscious, trying to, so how was that for you just on a personal level? How did that make you feel to be perceived in that way as a negative thing after you thinking like, man, I'm here to try to be excellent and bring this consciousness and morality to the world, and now you've done it, and now people are trying to tear you down for doing it?
It was real tough, Michael. I'll be honest with you. And it's because, a lot of to me, the way I looked at hip hop, now I'm from Milwaukee. So Milwaukee, it wasn't the East Coast, which is, it's obviously the Mecca for hip hop. And it wasn't the West Coast. It was the Midwest. And we were into all of it. Like we were into Luke Skywalker and, 2 Live Crew from Florida. We were into DC Go-Go from DC. We were into the East Coast with the Rockems and all of that. And we were into the West Coast with Dre and all of Cube and NWA. We were into all of that. So for me, hip hop was, number one, supposed to be diverse. And number two, it was supposed to push the boundaries of music, of lyricism, of creativity, of individuality. It was supposed to do that. Like, that's the point of hip hop, the way I see it. Yeah. And so I looked at Arrested Development as one of the new sort of pillars of what hip hop can stand on, not to take over or to destroy anything that had already been there. And I think, on the other hand, a lot of people from New York, because of the success you just mentioned, were feeling like we were competition as opposed to an addition to what hip hop is. And we were being embraced in such a widespread and mainstream way that I think, and winning awards too. So, I've been on numerous podcasts over the years, and I've been on podcasts with some of the people that lost to us at the award ceremony. So like at MTV, and we're in the exact same category. And they were just expressing their frustration at, they knew they had a killer record, and yet Arrested Development would win that category. And
Yeah.
we were winning a lot of awards. So I think there was a backlash of, number one, thinking that we were out to try to sort of replace hip hop into this, what they would perceive as mainstream friendly, white friendly, bohemian, sandal wearing hip hop, and take away all the grittiness of hip hop. And that's not what we were ever trying to do. We were striving to bring something to hip hop. Like I'll never forget a story. Me and you, we was playing basketball on tour, and we were backstage, and it was me, you, and the rest of the crew. And he was like, "You're gonna play basketball in these Birkenstocks?" It reminds me of the way we were perceived, as a crew in the hip hop realm. Was like, who are these hippies? Who are these, bohemian cats trying to, like you said, be too smart and too this and too that. So yeah, there was definitely backlash, and it definitely hurt. You know what I mean? Like, as a person that comes from the community and who works in the community, I definitely felt like, wow, you're not getting this. So yeah, it was sad.
Yeah. I remember feeling it too. Just because my music was also unique and also conscious, and and at that time, there was like a whole shift in hip hop from, the KRS Ones and those kinds of artists to then it became all about just party music, West Coast versus East Coast, misogynist lyrics, everything was about, gang violence, etc. And that kind of took over. And I felt like it was like what you just described. I felt like it was unfortunate because, to me, I used to just get excited every year a new hip hop record would come out.
Exactly.
Like the mold was broken every single time. It was like, oh man, here's a Schoolie D record and they're sampling Kashmir from, Led Zeppelin. And then somebody else comes out with something completely different. Somebody else coming. And when I listen to music today, I still love it. I still love all of it, but there's so much of it that sounds the same to me, and I guess there was then too, but it just seemed like there was more openness for artists to try to be noticed by breaking the mold,
Yeah, I actually agree. I think that there was a celebration of individuality then. And I think back to the era when we were touring. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy. It might have been Me Fi Me on some of these shows.
Yeah, Me Fi Me.
Yeah, which was totally unique. And of course, Arrested Development. So during that same time period, though, consciousness was coming from every direction. I mean, you had Fishbone, who was ska, and they were totally conscious, though, talking about all types of issues from their perspective. KRS-One talking about issues from his perspective. Public Enemy, us, all of these, totally different colors, totally different, palettes that we're using to express whatever we're expressing. But the consciousness, the pushing forward, all of that was still sort of consistent. And that's what I found so amazing, including, and I'm not talking about just Black artists, I'm talking including white artists and people of different backgrounds. So, I mean, it was just this explosion of consciousness and thought, intentionality, stuff like that was just exploding. And it was so exciting. So exciting.
I want to talk to you now about how you got into music, and how 3 years is an album. Like, talk to me about those 3 years,
Yeah, well, I started off just really admiring Michael Jackson, the Jackson 5. When I grew up, they had a cartoon on TV every Saturdays, and then Saturday was like kids' day, so we would all watch TV, and most of us only had one TV in our house, and we would, it was my time to watch TV, and I would watch the Jackson 5 on cartoons. I fell in love with music at that point. I used to try to imitate Michael Jackson when I was a kid, and I became a DJ. My dad, having not done so well with the paper, he started a nightclub. I became a DJ at age 13, and that was my true forge into the music world, where I was now, you know, really doing it and making money from it. And so anyway, so when I started Arrested Development, that had been the latest version of me trying to start a hip hop crew. I had a crew back in high school called Attack. Rest in peace. One of the members, TA, was murdered. And, you know, that crew did well for a little crew out of Milwaukee. But when I did Arrested Development in Atlanta, that was the first week I got to Atlanta. I put a flyer up saying, hey, I want to start rapping. I'm looking for a DJ. Headliner was looking at the flyer, started talking to him. And we started this journey of the 3 years, 5 months, 2 days it took for us to get a record deal. And the journey was basically creating this music, going around what we call the Chitlin circuit of venues in the Atlanta area, working totally for free and just doing shows. Our shows were more like inspired from the sound systems of Jamaica, or even the group like Soul to Soul from the UK, where Jazzy B was sort of the main hub of that group. And then he would have a ton of different guests on the record. When Arrested Development did shows back in those days, it was me and Headliner as sort of this hub. And then from that, the spokes were anyone we would invite on stage. We would invite painters on stage to paint live while we perform, African drummers, dancers, poets. So all of that was sort of this freestyle, almost like Freestyle Fellowship, the group. It was just this fellowship of artists and musicians doing their thing. And then when we got a record deal, finally, 3 years, 5 months, 2 days later, I had to, you know, how corporate sort of comes in and they say, well, who's the actual group members? Because we had about 20 people on stage at that point. And they were like, well, who could we take on tour? And we had to really especially me, I had to think like, okay, well, let's take Ishi, Razadon, Bobo J, Airly Tari, myself, and Headliner. That's going to be the people that go out on the road, even though we actually left behind a bunch of people that were performing with us a lot. And we started to take that on the road. And that became what the public would know as Arrested Development.
Yeah. And then when did you get your first, sniff that, man, this is kind of good. Like something might happen here. This record is starting to was it when you were in the studio, or was it when you were done with the record, or was when the first radio station played it? When did you start to feel that there was something unique and special and important happening?
There was 2 points, Michael. Like when I was in the studio with Tennessee, actually before I even did it in the studio, I used to record it on a cassette, little Tascam 4-track, right? And that would be my demo place where I do the demos. And even at that demo stage, I rode in the car in Milwaukee. I wrote the songs Tennessee, but I was in Milwaukee at the time. And I said, this is some of the best hip hop I've heard in a long time. And sounds arrogant, but as a hip hop lover, I loved hip hop enough to know that this was not done. Like this whole melodic rhyme style, this singing chorus at the end. I just knew that it had these particular ingredients had never been mixed in hip hop to this degree. And so I was like, this is beast right here. This Tennessee is beast. And when we got in the studio, it proved to be really great. It was in Bobby Brown's studio. He owned a studio here in Atlanta called BPOSITIIV. And so we recorded it there. He came in the room. He was like, yeah, what the hell? You know, he was like, this is crazy. But what really sealed the deal was we were on tour. And back then we were driving a van everywhere from city to city. And we pulled up to the venue and there was a line of people wrapped around the block. And so I asked my road manager, who was also the driver, Lisa, I said, Lisa, who's on this show with us? Because it never had been like that for the other shows. And she says, nobody, this is just y'all. And that was it. I was like, we're connecting. Like I felt it was dope, but it's another thing for the people to also agree. And I was like, we got something now.
Yeah. So as that Tennessee came out and really just exploded, and I remember just hearing it on the radio nonstop on multiple formats. I heard it on hip hop radio. I heard it on, traditional, like kind of classic soul radio stations. I heard it on the alternative radio station. I heard it on the pop station. It was on MTV, like on rotation nonstop.
Yeah.
So talk me through what happened with the rest of the record, and what were the challenges as this suddenly, you're going from being in a van to now it's like everybody wants a moment of your time, and some people want more,
Yeah. It was hard because we're such an organic group. We're like I said, we had 20 people on stage with us, and it was all based on whatever you could express in your talents. Now it's switched over into business. Like, everybody's making money in the group. Everyone, because of that, wants to be their manager. They got people coming at them. Can I be your agent? Can I be your manager? Can I do that? And so now, instead of us just looking at each other like group members, we're all starting to look at each other like, okay, business entities. And that's really tough to do in a creative space, So it was very interesting. And then especially the dynamic of, and I'm sure this happens to you, like with your group Spearhead, I'm sure before it was Michael's Franti Spearhead, or maybe it was always Michael Franti Spearhead, but like there's this need of pushing the lead vocalist to the front for all the photo shoots, and for the interviews they want to talk to me, and they don't, if they have a choice to talk to headliner, they'll choose me, and then it's like headliner's feeling some kind of way, Ishii's feeling like, well, they keep pushing them to the front, what about it? So this is our first album, so I'm not really fighting back with this. I don't know how it's supposed to work either. I've never done any of these big spreads. I've never done any of these big brands, magazines, whether Rolling Stone or Spin or Vogue or whatever, and it's like, I don't know, so we're just sort of being sort of cattled through this fence of like, this is what you do, go ahead. It started to cause a lot of internal stress in the group, because then, not to mention, I wrote a lot of the stuff. So my checks were looking bigger from publishing, from writing, than other members' checks were looking. So they're looking at me sideways, like, is he stealing money from the crew? And none of us knew how the business totally worked. So, all of that was a challenge and an obstacle to try to overcome. Like, how do you rectify all of this when all of it is so new?
Yeah. And when you guys were done with the first record, I mean, it seemed like you guys were out on the road with that record for like 2.5, almost maybe 3 years. At least that's what it felt like to me. And now you're coming to do, Zingalamadooni, and it's like, where did you start? How did you pick up? Like, there was so much that happened so fast.
Yeah, there was. To be honest, I wish we would have took more time to just digest what the hell just happened to us for 3 years, 5 months, 2 days album. Yeah. But the label had, they wanted to release a new AD record at a particular quarter for their quarterly earnings and all of their sort of corporate thinking. Yeah. And again, I didn't really understand how things worked. And I did feel the sand sort of slipping underneath my feet in hip hop culture, meaning what once felt like I knew what hip hop culture was all about, and I knew where we were all going as this big hip hop collective family in the world. It started to change. There began to be this movement of materialism where it's like, no, we're on this tip of like, we ride private jets, we're moguls, we're business people, we're like, and so it was like, what? Saying like that's what we used to fight against. Like when we used to get those kind of big corporate opportunities, generally speaking, hip hop artists would turn them down. Like, nah, we ain't about that. You know what I'm saying? Now it's changing. And it's like, I didn't know what to make of that. You know what I'm saying? Like, what? We're now saying that, oh, you could do like a popcorn shrimp commercial for Popeyes or KFC, I mean, and like, oh, now we're like selling cars. Is that what we're doing here? Like, so it totally changed. And I think it was tough. So that Zingalamadooni second album was me trying to stay human. Like, okay, I get all the money grabs and I get all of the ways that people can make money deals, but I would really where I find my strength and my comfort is, you know, in these things. So like that album to me was grounding, and but it didn't get received as well because the culture in hip hop had totally changed. So how I look at it is it changed right from under our feet. It was like, oh, okay, y'all are on this now.
So how was that for you on an emotional level, and how did you cope with that? I mean, that's a big shift for everybody, you know.
Yeah, I'll be honest, Mike. I was very depressed, you know, because music was my everything. I mean, it meant so much to me that it wasn't the success that I had to have, but I definitely wanted to have that connection. I think music for me is primarily a connection thing where I'm connecting with other people, and it's through the melodies, it's through the music and the lyrics and the beats. And so when I felt like that album wasn't connecting, I think that's what really made me depressed. And so I went through a period of serious depression, and it was for numerous years. I think from like 95, which was our last Arrested Development tour. We ended that tour in Japan, and the group sort of went our separate ways, went back home, and we just didn't want to get back together for a recording. So from 95 to when I started my first solo album in 96, that whole time period was very much a depressed period.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things that I also would say about Arrested Development as a band and as stage performers is that at that time, you know, people today might not know this, but at that time there was really no bands that were hip hop, you know, artists. It was just a DJ and a rapper. And I worked at a nightclub in San Francisco, the Kennel Club, and I saw every rock, every reggae band, every hip hop, every genre of music came through there. And I got to say, at that time, the hip hop shows were disastrous. You know, it was like the records were scratching, the artists were singing over top of their own vocals. They had, you know, 40 minutes of music, and the fans would be like, "We want more," and they'd play the same song over again. You know, it was like it was a disaster. But when you guys came out, and there were other bands too, you know, the Roots, the Goats, like Me Fi Me, like the bands you described, DC Basshead, you know, my band. There was other bands that were starting to bubble up, you know, as like we're performers, like we're going to bring you like a stage show. This isn't just going to be us coming in. Here's a little scratch here, and then I'm going to do a rap and then leave, you know. And so talk to me about that, the importance of live performance. And I'll also add that when I saw you guys on, I think it was the Sail Across the Sun cruise that we were on, and I hadn't seen you guys in a long time perform live. And I was just blown away at how good you guys are on stage, like how great you guys are as stage performers, as inspiring the crowd, as working with the crowd, connecting with the audience. And there's very few artists that do it as well as you and your whole crew do. So talk to me about that, the importance and why you guys decided to do it that way.
I really appreciate that, first of all. And, you know, for me, I think it was the influences. You know, we love Fishbone, and we would go see them perform. We loved a lot of the music coming out at the time, Tracy Chapman, and we loved, you know, Bjork, and, you know, it was a lot of really great music coming out at the time. And not much of it was in the hip hop realm that we were inspired from a live music standpoint, but we felt like, well, you know, we're sampling all these songs from incredible live musicians. I mean, you know, whether it's Lee Hubbard or, you know, Herbie Hancock or, you know, whoever. I mean, we're sampling all of James Brown. We're sampling so much great music. It surely should be that we could also add some of these live elements back into the stage show and into the records. And so, you know, obviously Stetsasonic was the first live band, you know, in hip hop music from back in the 80s, late 80s. And we loved them, saw them live. But since then, there hadn't been that type of energy, and Roots weren't out yet, so that wasn't really a thing yet. And so we wanted to bring that, and we felt like, especially my mindset coming from Milwaukee, who had never had a successful rap act, period. So I felt this extra pressure to make sure we're bringing something to the table that can't be denied in this present hip hop culture. And to us, bringing that live element did that. It matched what we were doing when I said we had 20 or more people on stage anyway, people come up after, drummers, dancers. So it matched everything we were doing, and it just made total sense to us. And when we started doing our first tour, we had Razadon on the drums. Later, we would have a guy named Foley on bass. Foley played with Miles Davis and so many others, Funkadelic, Parliament. So I say all of that to say, it just seemed like the right addition to bring to the table. I hope you can hear me. It seemed like it might went out.
I got you. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I got two more questions for you. I've always known you to be a very, very spiritual person, and not in a preachy manner, but in a just internal way, and a person of faith, person of deep consciousness, a person of thought and meditation. And how has your spiritual practice carried you through these, 30 years now of being an artist, and the highs and lows that you've experienced?
Yeah. It's been great. I mean, at the end of the day, my faith in God, my faith in a spiritual world that's behind the curtains of all of our lives, really, has been sort of the rock that keeps me motivated to move forward. And so during a lot of these highs and lows, I had to rely on that more than ever. And there was a time period where I was even a minister, where I was literally ministering to churches around the world. And that was even needed for me. I think all of that stuff was very important for keeping my sanity, for helping me to, have a sort of a spiritual place as a refuge with all the stuff going on, not just stuff that's going on in my personal life, but even socially and around the world. Those things were a refuge for me. And so, yeah, it's definitely a huge part of who I am.
Hmm. The final question is the question that I ask everybody who comes on the show, which is, what does it mean to you to stay human, and or what does it mean to be human, and how do you stay that way?
That's a fantastic question. I mean, for me, Michael, is when I'm able to look at someone's eyes and I see their humanity. And to me, it is connection. It's just connecting with human beings and making sure that you still see their fullness, their humanity, their intentions and their sacredness. So I look at each person as a motivation for me to remember who I am and what we owe each other, which we owe each other love. We owe each other respect and inspiration and encouragement. I feel that way. And so when I look in someone's eyes, that helps me to see a mirror of myself as well, and realize that we owe each other a lot of things.
Nice. Speech, man, I'm excited to have you on the Soul Shine at Sea cruise, man. It's going to be such a great experience. We've got all kinds of wellness practices that are taking place in the mornings, everything from yoga to HIIT classes to speech classes. Actually, there's someone who's be coming on board who's going to be helping people tell their personal stories, and then after that, it's going to turn into live music all into the night, and DJ music as well. And I know that folks who haven't seen you or who were fans from, going back to the very beginning, are going to be so happy and so blown away to see you guys perform. So I cannot wait to get together and do some music in person with you. That's going to be awesome.
Brother, I agree with you. I've always been proud of your trajectory, your journey, the creativity, the music, and I'm looking forward to being on this with you. And I'm grateful that you guys, reached out and asked if we would be able to do it. I jumped at the opportunity, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. So yeah, bro, I'm really fired up as well, and yeah, looking forward to rocking. And I hope we could do something together as always.
Yeah, let's do something together, and I'll bring my microphone and my laptop, and we'll just drop something too.
Done. For real. Like done.
Cool. Hey, this is Michael Franti here with Speech from Arrested Development on the Stay Human podcast, presented by Gibson Guitars. And if you want to know more information about the Soul Shine at Sea cruise, just go to michaelfranti.com and you can find out how to get on board there. It's going to be a really incredible floating festival at sea. And after everything that we've all been through over the last year plus, we need to have moments of people being able to come together in a safe way to just, as Speech has always said, to celebrate life.